Yes, the old classic on here, ripped from Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast. It is overrated, underrated, and I'm getting too good at these. And the subject for this week is going to be the Super NES controller. Considered by many to be one of the best controllers out there, do you think it's overrated or underrated? So, Brian, go ahead.
I'm going to trying to think. I think it's underrated, but also now I'm trying to think in terms of general how it's perceived. I don't know if anyone actually hates on it, so that's my only problem. I think, and maybe I'm just not in the right crowds. I mean, I generally think people consider the Super NES and the probably PS2 or 3 controller to be the best controllers of all time. And I think me and you have talked about this. We're pretty much on board with that. And it's pretty hard to argue those points, but I think you'll see a bigger push for people saying that the PS2 and 3 controllers are better, so it gets a little bit more. So I would just say it's underrated because at the time, the NES controller, I'm not even going to go pre-NES controllers because there were joysticks or the goofy shit that half of them didn't work or this or that. But the NES controller was the first, in my eyes, legit controller you had. And let's face it, it's fine. We grew up with it. We're used to it. But that shit was not ergonomic at all for your hands. So I didn't really love it in the sense of its design. It was simple. It did the job hell of a lot better than everything that came before it. But it was meh. The Sega Genesis controller, the first one that came with the system, it fit your hand okay, but as we found out with many games that required more than 3 buttons, that was a shit show of a controller. Obviously, you could end up getting the 6-button controllers and all was right in the world, but still, I'm just talking original controllers. The Super NES controller, the thing I think that is underrated about it is it never needed a modded version of its controller to work with later games. It had every button you needed. Having the top bumpers, where it was perfect. And honestly, it would continue to go on. That layout would go on to be the format for all future controllers. Still to this day, if you look down at your buttons at Xbox or PlayStation, the configuration is kind of based off of that Super NES design. So that's saying something. So I think just the fact that it kind of grandfathered in the way you play games and use the bumpers and this and that alone makes it underrated. But on top of that, that was a goddamn comfortable controller. That dog bone shape, no real hard edges on it. Like, I think it was pretty damn just it's what Nintendo does best. Their peripherals, their hardware are undeniable how good a quality they are. And honestly, it's probably the best Nintendo controller to date. Because we know the N64 is a piece of shit. I had to say that to piss Jim off. But really, in Nintendo's
They don't hold up well.
In Nintendo's history, Super NES, without doubt, I think, is the best controller they've created. So, yeah, I'm going to go underrated.
I'll agree that it's probably their best controller. And you know what? The shoulder buttons, revolutionary, genius design, and yeah, it had everything you needed right off the bat and never needed to be upgraded. But you know what? The buttons are mushy as shit. That controller is goddamn overrated.
They're mushy.
Have you ever tried to play a fighting game? Have you ever tried to play a fighting game with those shoulder buttons?
So here's the deal. Let's give some history to people. Jim got his first Super NES 3 years ago, approximately. I'm just throwing
4, but I still played it when I was a kid.
But I actually had it. I grew up with it, and yes, played plenty of fighting games. Just like any controller at the time, you completely got used to it. So even your beloved Genesis, which that first controller was a piece of shit, and why fighting games sucked on it until you get the 6-button.
Not a piece of shit. Still playable.
It was. Nah, not really. Play Street Fighter 2 without the 6-button controller and tell me it's okay.
Did for years. I'd still beat you with the 3 buttons. I'd beat you with the 3 button.
Jim, we have video evidence I beat you. What are you talking about?
We've never played that on video.
Look, I'm playing the clip right now for people. You see that? That's Jim. This is me.
We've never played Street Fighter.
So, yeah, no. Jim sounds like he just got a shitty controller. Plus, I know Jim has gotten a lot of cheap third-person controllers. And if you're buying the controllers
these are legit.
right now, I'm going to tell you, they're not like they were fresh out of the box in whatever year it was, 93 or... I don't know the year.
91.
Yeah, whatever year that came out. So fresh out the box, the buttons were perfectly fine. Now, if you're a maniac and you like break your buttons, you might have some issues. But yeah, a new controller, which is what I think we're basing this on, it was absolutely fine, no issues. So if your only complaint is mushy buttons, you're not valid.
No, it's valid. Mushy buttons are a big drawback.
Yeah, you're just not valid. It's cool.
Look, I'm not saying it's a bad controller. I would never say it's a bad controller. It's a great controller, actually. But people jerk off on that controller. And it's not... I would put the PlayStation... Hey, here's one for you. I'd put the PlayStation 2 controller way above the PlayStation... Or the Super NES controller.
Listen,
I'd put the GameCube controller above it.
Now you're being ridiculous. But I think...
Best analog stick ever.
Oh, goody. Because that means everything for all games ever. I think me and you can at least agree that PS2, whether you call it PS2 or PS3, I know there's some purist. Me and you don't have enough experience with PS3.
Little difference.
But PS2's, would you argue that that's the best controller?
DualShock is overall, the DualShock 2 is probably the best controller overall.
Yeah, so we agree with that. I'm not trying to say the Super NES is right there. Well, like I said, for me, it will always be...
People would, though. A lot of people would.
Oh, of course they would. But that's going to be your diehard Nintendo fans that, they probably hate PlayStation altogether. So, of course, they're going to say that the Super NES controller is the best ever. Like I said, what I will say is historically, that had... Now, I'm not trying to dig too deep, but that had the biggest impact because, like I said, that template, the way the buttons are laid out, the shoulder... Biggest impact really on gaming controllers, period, and we still use that kind of layout today, so you can't really just ignore that in terms of historical significance.
Yeah, which I'm not. Just mushy.
So yeah. So Jim's wrong once again on one of these.
No!
It's okay, Jim. One of these days we'll get a topic that people will agree with you on.
I am not wrong.
You're always wrong, but it's okay. That's why you're...
No, I know people are going to disagree with me on this because everyone fucking loves your goddamn Super NES controllers. So, fine, I know I'm going to get ripped apart, but the buttons are mushy, and you can.
So wait, let me hear you say this though. So your favorite Nintendo controller is the GameCube?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Interesting.
Comfortable as hell. The only drawback to that's that stupid fucking C-stick. They just made another analog stick. It would probably be one of the best controllers of all time.
So it sounds like the overall design of every part of it isn't really up to snuff. But yeah, no, if that wants to be your favorite, that's cool. No. Hey man, we all have our own
the
opinions.
favorite of Nintendo. Buttons aren't mushy.
Some people gotta live in France, and that's got to be their favorite country. I get it. Everyone has their own opinions. That's cool.